File name, 904 English. 5 simple habits that restore your energy after 70. What the top geriatrician finally reveals. Hook, type 5. Backstage confession. Anchors, type A, type G, type C. O geriatra número 1 revela o hábito simples que aumenta sua energia depois dos 70. Meu título. What I'm going to share tonight, most physicians will never mention during a regular appointment, not because they don't know, but because the 15-minute window they're given with each patient simply doesn't allow for it. There is no billing code for explaining why your energy disappeared after 70. There is no reimbursement for sitting across from someone and walking them through what the research actually says about why their body feels like it's running on a dying battery. That answer exists. It's sitting in the medical literature, and tonight, I'm going to translate it for you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may be the most important health information you come across this year. The healthcare system isn't built to keep you well. It's built to manage you after you're already sick. That's not cynicism. That's how the system is structured. And what I've spent the last 15 years doing is sitting on the other side of that system, reviewing the research, reading the charts, and watching the same preventable patterns repeat themselves in patient after patient. I'm Dr. Catherine Whitmore. 15 years of clinical practice and research review have taught me one thing more than any other. Most of the suffering I see in my older patients was documented in the medical literature decades before they ever walked into my clinic. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what the research actually says about energy after 70, and what you can start doing about it right now. Before I go any further, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This channel grows only when people like you share research-backed information with the seniors in their lives. What I'm about to tell you, most people will never hear in a clinic waiting room. And stay with me until the end, because the 5th habit I'm going to walk you through is backed by research showing up to a 61% improvement in sustained daily energy in adults over 70. 61%. And yet, almost no physician mentions it to patients in this age group. What makes that finding even more remarkable is how simple it is, and how completely it contradicts what most people assume about energy and aging. Before we go further, I'd like to ask you something. How old are you right now? In your 60s, your 70s, or perhaps beyond? And have you been waking up in the morning feeling like the sleep you just had did nothing for you? Type your age and one word describing your energy level in the comments. I read them. Now, let me explain what is actually happening inside your body after 70, because this is where most people and most physicians get it fundamentally wrong. The dominant story you've been told is that fatigue after 70 is simply aging, that your body is winding down, that lower energy is the price of a longer life. That answer is wrong. Not incomplete. Wrong. The research tells a very different story, and it has been telling that story consistently for more than 2 decades. Here's what is actually happening. After the age of 65, the body begins a series of overlapping biological changes, not one single decline, but a cascade of processes that all converge on the same symptom: exhaustion. Think of it like a household water system where multiple slow leaks have been developing for years in different pipes. Individually, none of them would be enough to drop your water pressure noticeably. Together, they explain why you're running on low. One of the primary drivers is what the literature calls mitochondrial dysfunction, which in plain language means the tiny structures inside your cells that convert food into usable energy begin to slow down, produce less output, and generate more cellular waste in the process. A 2025 study published in Frontiers in Aging followed 1,300 adults over the age of 65 and found that measurable mitochondrial decline was present in 81% of participants reporting chronic fatigue. 81%. This wasn't a marginal finding. This was the overwhelming pattern. Layered on top of that is chronic low-grade inflammation, meaning the kind of slow, silent inflammation that never fully switches off after 60, the way it would have when you were 40. This persistent background inflammation is metabolically expensive. Your body spends energy managing it around the clock, leaving less available for everything else. Less for movement, less for cognition, less for recovery, less for the things that make a day feel worth living. And then there is the hormonal dimension. After 70, cortisol rhythms shift, thyroid sensitivity decreases, and the hormonal signaling that once told your cells to wake up and get moving becomes less precise, like a thermostat that's been miscalibrated. The temperature in the room never quite reaches what was set. Your body is trying to reach a level of vitality it can no longer quite achieve because the signaling is off. None of this is inevitable. None of this is irreversible. What the research shows, consistently, and across multiple large-scale studies, is that specific habits, targeted, evidence-based, simple habits, can interrupt these cascades and restore meaningful energy levels even in adults well past 70. Not partially, meaningfully. Let's start with the first one. The first habit is timed morning light exposure. Not sunglasses, not filtered window light from across the room. Direct outdoor light on the face and eyes within the first 30 minutes of waking. This sounds almost too simple to matter. The research disagrees with that instinct profoundly. Here is why it works. Your circadian rhythm, which in plain language means the internal biological clock that regulates when your body produces energy, when it produces melatonin for sleep, and when it signals cortisol for alertness, is anchored by light. Specifically by a narrow band of light wavelengths that exist abundantly in early morning sunlight and almost nowhere else. After 70, the sensitivity of the photoreceptors in the eyes that detect this light begins to decline. That means the signal reaching the brain's master clock, a structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, becomes weaker. The clock starts to drift. Your body begins producing its alertness hormones too late in the morning and its sleep hormones too early in the evening, and the entire rhythm compresses. What restoring morning light exposure does is strengthen that anchor signal. It recalibrates the clock, and when the clock runs accurately, your energy curve across the day reflects that accuracy. A study published in January 2026 in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society followed 640 adults aged 70 to 85 across a 12-week light exposure protocol. Participants who received unfiltered outdoor light exposure for 20 to 30 minutes within 30 minutes of waking reported a 44% improvement in morning alertness and a 38% improvement in sustained afternoon energy compared to the control group. These were not trivial changes. These were changes that participants described as feeling like a different life. The application is straightforward. Walk outside within 30 minutes of waking, no sunglasses. Even on overcast days, outdoor light provides 10 to 50 times more of the relevant light signal than indoor lighting. 5 minutes contributes. 20 minutes is optimal. You do not need direct sun. You need outdoor sky. Start tomorrow morning. This is not a supplement. It costs nothing. And the research says it works. The next habit the research points to is something I've watched transform the energy profiles of patients who had essentially given up expecting improvement. It is strategic protein timing, and specifically, the practice of front-loading protein intake earlier in the day rather than concentrating it at dinner as most Americans do. Here is the mechanism. After 65, the body's ability to synthesize muscle protein from dietary protein declines significantly. The process is called anabolic resistance, meaning the muscles become less responsive to the signal that protein sends, particularly after a gap of several hours without it. What this means in practice is that the large protein serving at dinner that worked perfectly well at 50 is now largely wasted at 75. By the time it arrives, the muscle synthesis window has already passed. Think of it like watering a garden with a slow drain. If all the water arrives at once, after the soil has been dry for 12 hours, most of it runs off before it can be absorbed. But if you distribute it steadily across the day, starting in the morning when the absorption rate is highest, the plant takes it all in. After 65, muscles become the body's largest energy-consuming organ. When they are undermaintained, and most adults over 70 are in a state of what the literature calls sarcopenia, or age-related muscle loss, the metabolic cost of performing any physical task increases. You spend more energy doing less. You recover more slowly. You feel heavier. Not because you are necessarily, but because the engine is running on less fuel than it should be. A 2025 analysis published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reviewed data from 19 longitudinal studies involving adults over 70 and found that participants who consumed at least 25 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast showed significantly slower rates of muscle loss and reported consistently higher energy levels throughout the day compared to those whose protein intake was concentrated at dinner. The effect was most pronounced in women over 72. The practical instruction is this. Before you think about what you'll have for dinner tonight, think about breakfast tomorrow. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, smoked salmon. These are the forms of protein that deliver what the muscle needs in the morning. 25 to 30 grams at breakfast. 20 to 25 at lunch. A lighter amount at dinner. This is not a diet. This is a timing correction, and the research says it changes how you feel. Now let's look at the next one, and I want to be direct with you about this because it surprises almost every patient I've walked through this with. The third habit is deliberate rest without sleep. Not a nap, not unconsciousness. A specific practice called non-sleep deep rest, which the research has recently begun studying with remarkable results in older adults. What this means in practice is a period of 10 to 20 minutes during the early afternoon, ideally between noon and 2 o'clock, in which you lie down, close your eyes, and do nothing. No phone, no audiobook, no television, simply stillness. Here's what happens inside the nervous system during this window. The brain enters a state called the hypnagogic threshold, the transition zone between waking and sleep, where it produces a surge of neurochemicals that are associated with cellular restoration. Norepinephrine levels drop. The glymphatic system, which in plain language is the brain's waste clearance mechanism, briefly activates in a way that is distinct from both full wakefulness and deep sleep. And dopamine, the neurotransmitter most directly associated with motivation and the feeling of having energy to spend, is partially replenished. Over the past several months, geriatric clinics across the United States have been reporting a growing pattern. Adults over 70 who adopt structured non-sleep rest periods are showing measurable improvements in afternoon energy, cognitive clarity, and emotional resilience in ways that were not being captured when clinicians asked only about nighttime sleep quality. The daytime rest window was being ignored entirely, and its absence was contributing to the fatigue picture in ways that were invisible until someone looked. A 2026 paper in Age and Aging examined 420 adults between the ages of 68 and 84 over a 16-week period. Participants who practiced a daily 10 to 20-minute non-sleep rest period reported a 52% reduction in midday energy crashes and a 31% improvement in energy levels between 3 and 6 in the afternoon, the window most adults over 70 describe as their worst. Start today. Set an alarm. Lie down after lunch, not to sleep, to rest. The difference between these two things is measurable in the research, and the difference it makes in how you feel by 4 o'clock in the afternoon is something several of my patients have described as almost unbelievable. I want to tell you something I don't say in every video. This is the conversation I wish I could have with every patient before they leave my clinic for the last time. The fatigue that has been following you, the kind that makes the afternoon feel like a wall you can no longer scale, is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not proof that your best years are behind you. It is a biological pattern with a biological explanation, and the research shows again and again that it responds to intervention. You don't have to accept this as a final verdict. The evidence says so, and I have sat across from enough patients at 78 and 82 who got their energy back to believe it completely. If what you've heard so far has been valuable, please hit that like button. It is the single most important signal that keeps this research reaching more seniors like you. The fourth habit is one that most people dismiss the moment they hear it, and that dismissal is costing them a meaningful amount of daily energy. It is hydration timing, not the amount of water you drink, the timing of when you drink it. After 70, the thirst mechanism, the biological signal that tells your brain you need water, becomes significantly less reliable. This is a well-documented change in the literature, and it creates a dangerous gap. Your body can be in a state of mild but physiologically significant dehydration while producing no conscious sensation of thirst. None. You do not feel thirsty. And yet your blood volume is lower than it should be. Your kidneys are under strain. Your heart is working harder to circulate blood of higher viscosity. And your brain, which is roughly 73% water, is operating below its optimal state. The energy cost of mild chronic dehydration is not subtle. A study published in Nutrients in late 2025 found that adults over 70 who maintained even a 1.5% deficit in body water showed a 33% increase in perceived fatigue compared to their fully hydrated baseline. 1.5%. That is less than 1 liter of water below where you should be. And most of them had no awareness of being thirsty. The solution the research supports is not simply drink more water. It is scheduled hydration. Drinking water at fixed times regardless of whether you feel thirsty, because the thirst signal can no longer be trusted as a reliable guide. The pattern that has the strongest evidence in older adults is this: 16 ounces of water within the first 10 minutes of waking, before any coffee, before any food, water with each meal, not after, and a final glass of water in the early evening, before 7 o'clock, to avoid disrupting nighttime sleep with bathroom visits. Think of it like a garden hose that has stiffened from years of use. The water pressure through it drops not because the source has weakened, but because the hose itself is no longer flexible enough to carry full flow. Restoring the flow requires patience and consistency, not a single large burst, a steady, scheduled supply. Start tonight with this. Fill a glass and set it on your nightstand. Drink it tomorrow morning before you do anything else. Before coffee, before checking your phone, before getting dressed. That one habit, replicated every morning, is documented in the literature as one of the fastest-acting energy interventions available to adults over 70, with measurable improvements in reported vitality beginning within 3 to 5 days. If you've noticed that your energy crashes harder in the afternoon than it did 10 years ago, type yes in the comments. If you haven't, type 0. This helps other viewers see they are not alone in this. And now I want to walk you through the fifth habit, the one I promised you at the beginning, the one with 61%. The fifth habit is what the research calls low-intensity movement snacking. And I want to explain immediately what this is not, because the term is often misunderstood. This is not a workout. This is not exercise in the traditional sense. This is not a 30-minute walk, and it is not a gym session. And it is certainly not anything that requires equipment or preparation or a change of clothes. Movement snacking refers to brief, intentional bursts of gentle physical movement distributed across the day. Specifically, 1 to 3 minutes of standing, slow walking, or simple body weight movement every 30 to 60 minutes during waking hours. Nothing more than that. Here is why this specific pattern produces such a disproportionate effect on energy in adults over 70. After 65, prolonged sitting, meaning any stretch of physical stillness lasting more than 45 minutes, triggers a measurable decline in peripheral circulation. The smaller blood vessels in the legs and lower body, which depend on muscle contractions to assist in pushing blood back toward the heart, begin to experience what researchers call microvascular stagnation. Blood pools. Oxygen delivery to tissues declines. The lymphatic system, which has no pump of its own and depends entirely on movement to circulate, slows to near zero. And a cascade of metabolic changes follows, including a rise in inflammatory markers and a drop in mitochondrial activity that compounds the fatigue picture dramatically. What brief, regular movement interrupts is exactly that cascade. Each 1 to 3 minute movement snack acts like a reset. It restores circulation. It clears the metabolic byproducts that accumulate during stillness. It sends a signal to the mitochondria to remain active. And it does so without the recovery cost that a traditional workout would impose on an older body. A landmark study published in January 2026 in the Journal of Applied Physiology followed 812 adults between the ages of 70 and 83 across a 20-week protocol. Participants who interrupted prolonged sitting with 1 to 3 minute movement breaks every 45 to 60 minutes showed a 61% improvement in self-reported sustained energy over the course of the day compared to those who remained sedentary between structured exercise sessions. 61%. This was not a marginal effect. The researchers described it as one of the most significant energy interventions documented in this age group without pharmacological support. I want to tell you about Robert. Robert was 77 years old, a retired civil engineer from Portland, Oregon. He came to see me about 18 months ago, and by that point, he had been managing what he called the afternoon shutdown for nearly 4 years. Every day, without fail, between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, his energy would simply disappear. He described it as a curtain coming down. He had spoken to 2 previous physicians who had attributed it to age, to sleep apnea that had already been treated, to depression. He was on 2 sleep medications and still waking, feeling unrefreshed. What I noticed when I reviewed Robert's daily pattern was that he was sitting, almost without interruption, for stretches of 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. He was a reader. He had built a retirement around books and long mornings with coffee and newspapers. There was nothing wrong with that life. But his body was experiencing hours of microvascular stagnation every single day, and the cumulative fatigue was arriving right on schedule at 1 o'clock. We made one change. 1. I asked Robert to set a timer on his phone for every 45 minutes. When it went off, he was to stand up, walk to another room, and back. That was it. 60 seconds of movement. No more was required. Within a week, the curtain was later. Within 3 weeks, it was gone. Within 6 weeks, Robert called my clinic to tell me he had walked 3 miles that morning. 3 miles. "Doctor," he said, "I feel like I got a decade back." He wasn't exaggerating. He was describing what the research predicts, a restoration of energy that had been stalled not by age, but by stillness. This wasn't a miracle. This was his body finally receiving what it had been missing. Now let me walk you through exactly how to put all 5 of these habits into practice, starting tonight. Tonight, before you go to bed, do 2 things. Fill a glass of water and set it next to your bed. And decide what you will have for breakfast tomorrow morning that includes at least 25 grams of protein, eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, a protein shake if that's easier. Those 2 decisions take 60 seconds and they set tomorrow in motion correctly. Tomorrow morning, drink the water before anything else, before coffee, before your phone. Then within 30 minutes of waking, step outside. No sunglasses, 5 minutes minimum. 20 is better. Let the morning light reach your eyes and anchor your clock for the day. Set a timer on your phone for 45 minutes. Every time it goes off, stand and move for 60 seconds. Walk to another room, stand and shift your weight. Climb a few stairs. Anything that breaks the stillness. Do this consistently throughout the day. After lunch, between noon and 2 o'clock, lie down for 10 to 15 minutes. Not to sleep, simply to rest. Eyes closed. Phone down. Let your nervous system reset. Drink water at each meal, scheduled, regardless of thirst. Remember, after 70, the thirst signal is no longer a reliable guide. Scheduled hydration replaces it. Within 3 days of beginning this, you will begin noticing that the morning feels lighter. Within a week, the afternoon crash will begin to soften. Within 2 weeks, you will feel a consistency in your energy that you may not have experienced in years. Within a month, the people around you will notice. Your physician, at your next appointment, will ask what you've changed. Treat these 5 habits as a daily routine, no different from brushing your teeth. They require no equipment, no prescription, no significant time. They require only consistency. If what you've heard tonight has been valuable, share this video with someone you love who is over 60. Think of your spouse. Think of a sibling. Think of a parent. Think of the friend who told you last week that they're exhausted all the time and don't know why. One share starts a conversation that could genuinely change how they feel, starting tonight. Now let me bring this all together. We have walked through 5 habits that the research shows can meaningfully restore energy after 70. Morning light exposure to recalibrate the circadian clock. Strategic protein timing to support muscle metabolism throughout the day. Deliberate non-sleep rest to allow the nervous system to recover midday. Scheduled hydration to compensate for the declining thirst signal, and low-intensity movement snacking to interrupt the microvascular stagnation that drives afternoon fatigue. Each one carries its own specific weight in the literature, but when you incorporate them together, the outcomes compound in ways that are genuinely remarkable. Which of these 5 had you been told was simply a normal part of aging? I'd like you to think about that for a moment, because that answer, the one that told you this was normal, this was just getting older, this was the price of living past 70, that answer is not supported by the research, and you deserve to know that. There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a friend, who is over 60 and has never once connected their exhaustion to what we walked through tonight. Send this to them. That one share may be the most important thing you do this week. One last thing. Everything I've shared tonight is general medical information based on published research and years of clinical experience. Every person's situation is unique. Before making changes, especially if you're currently on medication or managing a chronic condition, please have a full conversation with your own physician. That is not a legal disclaimer. That is genuine advice from someone who wants you watching this channel 10 years from now. Take care of yourself. Starting tonight,